Welcome to Fyght Talk. My name is Christian Young. Grand opening, grand closing. My name is Christian Young and welcome to Fyght Talk. Today we're going to talk about the concept of your business actually closing and or you selling your business, whatever you want to call it, your business will cease to exist for yourself. And I think that this is a serious topic that needs to be taken into consideration by all entrepreneurs because you should have a strategy for what you eventually want to do with your business. We all will not live forever, so you do need to have an exit strategy or a plan by which you're going to move your business along down whatever path that you choose for it. Now, I've been the creator and ender of several businesses, and while not all of those were licensed second grade situations, I have had the experience in understanding that sometimes things just don't work out. Some businesses are not meant to last forever, and that's okay. That's why you have the opportunity to always try again. But you should know that it doesn't mean that you're a failure. It doesn't mean that you're not meant to be an entrepreneur. It just means that maybe this wasn't the right business or the right time for you, and there may be a better time later. Secondarily, when you're looking at your business, you may have just decided, I'm starting this business. I only want to do this for probably about 5-10 years, and then I want to sell it. Having an exit strategy and planning towards an exit strategy is common in business. And that doesn't mean that you're a failure either. It just means that this is where I want to go and this is how I'm going to go about it. I know plenty of entrepreneurs who've had wins and who have had losses when it comes to business. And the commonality in all of that is that they view those experiences as building and learning experiences and use that information to help inform their future decisions. So when you have your grand opening, just know eventually there will be a grand closing. It may not be under your leadership, but it will eventually happen. So today we're here with a special guest. And I say a special guest because it's my sister. And so her name is Brianna. And we're going to talk a little bit about her journey in entrepreneurship and her conclusions when she decided to wind down her business. So good morning.
Good morning.
So I'm happy to have you here. And it's really weird because we're related, but thank you for coming.
Good. Thank you for having me. It's always good to be recognized by those who are close to you.
So I wanted to bring you on today because this episode is around the grand closing, as I call it. So concepts around closing businesses. And I know you have had your own business. You come from a family of entrepreneurs. Like there's a lot of people who have businesses in our family. And you came to the conclusion at a certain point that you wanted to close your business. So I thought that this was the perfect episode for you to come and kind of share your thoughts, because I think that it's important for fellow entrepreneurs to understand that throughout your business journey, at some point,
right,
you will end up closing your business. Now, it could be closing because you have made that journey into the upper room, or it could be closing because of a multitude of reasons outside of just you are no longer there to run it. So maybe taking a step back, can you tell us a little bit about your business?
So, as you know, I opened my business because of necessity. Right. So it was something that I had always wanted to do, but, I felt like it was too big. And then when I got into a position where I wasn't actively working for someone else, and I needed to find a way to, pay bills and take care of my family and things like that, I was like, you know what, this is the time. And so that's when I launched my law practice, working with small and mid-sized businesses. And so I decided to specialize in those who were doing startups and working through to maybe about 50 million in gross sales, and helping them to realize their dreams. And that was something that was very important for me because I find that a lot of small businesses don't have someone to help them through that path and through that journey to make sure that their businesses are successful. And so that's why I started. And it was a fantastic opportunity. And I was really happy doing that. But it came to a point where, it was time to wind down. That season was over.
So what were the factors in making you decide that you needed to wind down your business?
At that point, when I looked at my book of business and I looked at how much I could support as an individual versus what I would need to do to scale up, and my family needs and what my kids needed at the time and sort of what I needed as far as benefits and other things like that, I didn't have individually the capacity to scale up the way I needed to in order to get to where I wanted to get to. And so I had to look at other avenues in order to do that. And so I decided that was not the time for me to actively go about that scaling up and that building. And so I had to sort of make the decision. Although it was a little painful, I did have to make the decision to, responsibly wind down.
And as you said, now that's a tough decision. Now, all of my wind downs have just been because the wind up was crazy. But I think that kind of delving into the topic of winding down your business, not for a sale or because of some sort of catastrophic event where you can no longer run it, but a conscious decision to wind down your business can result in some feelings. And one of those feelings that I talked about that I think is important to kind of address is that potential feeling of failure.
Right.
And kind of, can you talk a little bit about like your emotional journey through that? Because I know we've talked about it a lot, and about the fact that winding down your business does not mean that you're a failure. Sometimes it's the responsible thing to do.
Absolutely. I had these grandiose dreams for what I wanted to do if I ever got into a position to start my own practice and where I wanted to be. And so when I found that I was not at the time, it wasn't so much that it was a failure. My clients were thriving. What I was doing at that level was thriving, but it wasn't where I wanted to be. So it was a not yet. And I had to get past the feelings of I'm not making it to, no, I am making it in this space, but I ascribe to a larger space. And so it's not a failure, it's a success here, but it's a not yet for what's to come. And so really just because of the nature of what I do or what I was doing, I had to take in consideration not only my feelings, but my clients and how to walk them through what their next steps were going to be because I was winding down, and for them to find assistance so that they could continue to be successful even in the face of me winding down.
I think that you bring up an interesting point, because the impact of winding down your business when you have clients, when you have customers, I think is a bit larger than what people can assume.
Absolutely.
Because you need to kind of give the and then what to people. While also dealing with how you're feeling about your business, you need to also responsibly handle the and then what for your clients. How did your clients respond?
They were not happy. They were not happy because part of my business model was to really build a model where I partnered with them. I really was part of their management team and part of their training team and things like that. So, stepping back, walking them through sort of, hey, you can do this now. We've built the infrastructure where you can do this, assuring them that I was going to be responsible in still maintaining business records, right? Because a lot of people think, we're going to shut down and that's it. No, you still have, you may have business record retention policies that you still need to abide by. You still need to keep those things confidential that you need to keep confidential. And so you have to make sure you return original documents and records and all of those things. And so walking them through, this is how we're going to do this. If you have a 7-year retention policy, I'm still going to keep those documents on hand. But in 7 years, I'm going to automatically destroy those documents. If you need help finding somewhere else, let me point you to some other people to help you find somewhere else. Remember those plans that we put in place? This is how you can walk through those plans. And then also, because I was winding down, but I was still available, I let them know for 6 months, you can still contact me if you have an issue. We'll walk through it. I'll help you find someone else, but you still have those resources. And so it was sort of a gradual wind down for them, whereas for me, it was a more immediate.
So like the concept of grand closing, like I think that you're explaining something that a lot of people don't really think about. You don't just close the doors and be like, this is done.
No.
I am finished. Do not call me. The number is disconnected. We've taken down the website.
Right.
You still have to, there's a tail to it. There's, a lot of additional steps that you have to take when you wind down. As a small business owner, even a corporation does the same things. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of moving pieces. And to go through that journey and deal with your emotions.
Yes.
And deal with the emotions of your clients and customers can be significant.
Absolutely.
How did you recover from that?
So I am a person who launches myself into the next project. And so that's sort of what I did, to be honest with you. I don't know if that's the healthiest thing to do. But I really launched myself into the next project. But as I said, it was a slow wind down as far as clients were concerned. But I tried to maintain those relationships as well. And try to just be mindful of those relationships can lead to greater later, so to speak. So I'm not done with my entrepreneurial journey. While I do have an employer currently, in the future, it's not outside of the realm of possibility that I would come back to that space. Life is different, right? Children are older. You have more knowledge. You've become an expert in some other things. It may be an opportunity to relaunch, and bring in some other people and sort of learn from the lessons of the past. So it's not beyond the realm of that. It's not, like you said, it's not that I failed. It's that later. It just wasn't the time.
So now we've heard a little bit about you, so enough about you. Let's dive into some of your expertise, which happens to be business.
It is business.
Yes. And the legal aspects of business. And knowing that, I know that I personally call you a lot to ask questions about, can I do this? Is this actually legal? Will I go to jail today?
Right.
So on the wind down side, and in the development of your business plan and the exit strategy, what are some things that you recommend at the beginning for business owners to really take into account when they think about the what's next for their business?
So I used to counsel a lot of small and mid-sized businesses, and some of the things we focused on were startups. Some were already going concerns, but some of them were startups. And so I say begin with the ending in mind, because like you said earlier, sometimes you leave because, you transition. Sometimes you leave because you sell it to someone else. Sometimes you leave because you have to. And so what is your plan for leaving? One of my clients, he used to laugh all the time because I would tell him, plan for war in times of peace. Whatever difficulty you think you may have, let's plan for it now while you're not in it. So we're, setting a responsible plan and we're responding and not reacting. So in that instance, depending on your type of business that you have, who are your potential buyers if you have to sell? Let's identify them. Who are, your partners? Are your partners in a position to take over if you have to step down? If you have children who are involved in the business, this is a second or third generation business, are they prepared to take over? What are your plans for that? How are you preparing your leaders to step into that role if you have to step down? So many of our businesses, we're not training people in leadership to actually lead. We're teaching them to enter timesheets, right, and approve vacation requests. But can they actually help you run the business? And in your absence, can they run the business? If you have to wind down, who is going to take over for you? If there is an emergency, as a lawyer, they teach us this all the time. If there's an emergency or something, your client still has cases. Who's going to go to court for you? Who's going to get your client files? Who's going to step into that? So you want to take time to set that plan in place. And it's going to change, right? It's going to evolve as your company evolves. But let's set a primary plan in place so that this isn't so traumatic when you're in the midst of it, so that your spouse, so that your children don't have to figure out what to do with your business after you're gone.
So I think that that's a key point, because one of the things in all of my years of consulting now we used to consult on a lot was succession planning. And I think that there are two different types. There is succession planning for a role, but then more importantly, it's succession planning for your business.
Right.
And it's kind of creating that plan so that if something unforeseen does happen, you have someone who can step in and who has a playbook, essentially. And you're not completely disrupting your entire business because we have a new leader and they said, we're going to do all these things this way.
Right.
And so you'll have some of that, but you need to have that solid foundation in order to document it.
Exactly.
So that can be overwhelming.
Yes.
Where do you recommend that an entrepreneur would start? And we're talking about from beginning.
So starting from the beginning, looking at what you do, right? If you're making widgets, whatever that widget thing is.
Everybody make widgets.
Right? Everybody makes widgets, right? If you're in manufacturing and your business needs to wind down, what are your clients going to do? Think about who you're going to pass it off to. Think about who's actually in a position to lead, even if you have a person to lead to wind down, right? Who's in a position to do that? And we have to think about that from a rational point of view and not an emotional one. Well, I should leave it to XYZ person. No, you should leave it to the most capable person who's able to do it. And then not just, put this down in paperwork, discuss it with them in advance, so that they know that they're responsible for stepping into this role. I don't want to receive a phone call and someone says, oh, by the way, we're dropping off, 300 boxes of files because so-and-so has passed away. What are you talking about? I have no idea. What am I supposed, and what am I doing with these files? So all of those different things, let them know, these are the things that you need to do in advance. I think that's the key thing, because so many times we make a plan and don't tell people that they are part of the plan.
I think that part of that is just because the world can be slightly dramatic.
Yes.
And, I think that there's this overarching thought that if you tell someone that they're next, that they're going to try to accelerate that nextness. So how do you overcome kind of those feelings, because I think that transparency sometimes can be viewed as a weapon in some people's minds. And, there's a lot of the concept of like, I want to hold some of this information close to my chest, because if I tell people, then they're going to, come in here brand new, like I am the next best thing, in the world. How do you counsel, or how did you counsel your clients through that? So
I think that a lot of times we do that. We want to hold the information to ourselves, so then we're indispensable, right? You're automatically going to be indispensable. There are some things, there's some institutional knowledge that you have that others won't have. You can't teach it. You can't instill it in someone, okay? But you have to take the time to bring them along. You have to have the proper boundaries in place, right? There are some things that only you can do. We can't overpromise and oversell to someone, but at the same time, we need to walk them through what they need to know, or at least let them know where to find what they need to know, right? This is no different from family planning and estate planning, which we don't do, and everyone should have a will, by the way. No, it's important, right? We all act like, we're not going to die, or we act like our business isn't going to end. Right? There's only one business which has been going for thousands of years. And it's like, what? The Catholic Church has been around forever, right? But everyone else, like, there are some car companies that started that are not here anymore. There are some larger banks that started that are not here anymore. And no one thought at the time that they would end, that they thought they were too big to fail, but they did. We need to adequately plan for and train our leaders and train our next ups, right, to be able to step into those roles.
And so one of the things that you talked about was like the next up. And I think that from a small business perspective, because we both have worked with small businesses in different roles, that can be something that's hard to conceptualize, especially when you are your business. When your business sits here and there's not a widget, there's not, something that you're actually giving to people. It's actually a knowledge-based business. How do you determine your next up when initially it's just you?
So early on, a lot of times, and it is just you have to help your client to understand that. You have to help your client to have their plans in place, because there's nothing that's coming up behind you. If you're helping a company to develop a strategic plan, put it in writing. So often we want to, like you said, we want to keep it in our heads so that they have to contact us. Put it in writing for your client. Put it on paper, help them walk through it, help them understand it, whatever it is that you're doing. Because sometimes there won't be a next step. You are the brand, you are the company. And in some instances, there's just nothing you can do about it.
Another question that I have, just because you're triggering a lot of questions, but this is normal for us. So I apologize if this episode is for 4 hours. So another question that I think that is very important to kind of consider is when it is just you and there is no next up and you don't have anyone to kind of do the and then what for your clients. What can you do to kind of, outside of, the documenting and making sure that they're aware that it is just you, from a business perspective, what should you be putting into place to make sure that at least the business can come to a finite end, if you, instead of kind of just leaving loose ends for your family, for whoever inherits the world after, that final conclusion.
Right.
What things can you do? Is it just the will? Is it just, do you reach out and do you engage someone to kind of make sure that that's taken care of? How do you kind of make sure that there's a bow on everything?
So it really depends on what you're doing, right? So when I was in practice, I had another lawyer who I had already reached out to and said, listen, you are a part of my succession plan. So if something happens to me, I need you to wind down for my clients. Right. So she knew that she was, and she wasn't necessarily in the same field that I was in. She handled prosecutions, right? Instead of small businesses, but she knew enough about small businesses where she could help them to wind down. And so really it's just, there's no way around responsibly identifying someone to help wind it down, because if not, it's just, you're gone, right? And so do you really care once you're gone? No, because you've transitioned on. But your clients care, your family cares, your overwhelmed spouse cares, because now they've got to deal with clients calling in addition to, funeral plans. Your kids care, for the same reason. So it's really a matter of how much do you care about those who are left, because they're planning not for you, you're gone, you're planning for them.
How much do you think the wind down of business impacts ego?
I think there are a lot of times when people stay much longer than they should. If you're not in a position to be able to do what you used to do, you need to wind down. You need to transition. You need to sell it to someone else, and you don't want to get to a point where you've lost all intangibles, right? You've lost reputation and everything else because you're not able to deliver the same level of product that you used to. And so, it gets very hard, right? I think that a lot of our seasoned business owners, right? A lot of our seasoned business owners, they remember how they used to do it. And sometimes, even if they're still doing it the way they used to and they're still producing at the same level, maybe the marketing is different. Maybe they're not selling as well as they used to. And you have to be able to, when you're setting your strategic plans and when you're setting your business plans, you have to be able to look at it and say, is this the level of success that I want? Is this the level of achievement that I want? And if not, am I in a position to make it better? If not, is it time to go?
So then that leads me to one last question. Just because I think that this triggered a thought overall with regards to the wind down, the sale, determining what your end game is for your business. Are you scaling up? Are you scaling down? How that works? How open would you recommend somebody be to change?
Oh, you have to change. I mean, if you're not changing, if you're stagnant, it's going to wind itself down, right? Because everything, that's the one constant is change. Market is going to change. Your consumers are going to change. Your clients are going to change. Even if you're doing everything the way you should, things are still going to change. So you have to be open to, people use that buzzwords and strategic planning, and we need to, but you have to sit down with your business, with your baby, and say, hey, is this business in the kid phase? Is it in the teenage phase? Is it adult? Is it thriving? How do we get it to the next stage? Or are we content with it being in this stage? Are we content to be a small business? Or are we now trying to be a mid-sized business? Are we content, selling in Chicago? Or are we trying to sell also in Peoria? Are we trying to sell in Springfield? Are we trying to sell in New York? Are we trying to be national? Are we trying to be international? And how do we do that? And what are the processes? And figure out what that change is going to be. And sometimes we think that everything is stagnant, and then we get a pandemic and everything changes, and you just throw the whole book out the window and try and figure out a new thing, right? But change is the only thing that is going to happen, and we have to plan for it. We have to be prepared.
Thank you so much for coming today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And can you tell our viewers where they can find you?
Yes, I am terrible about social media. I will say that. But you can find me on LinkedIn. Don't ask me what the LinkedIn is, but my profile is open. I am easy to find. So you can find me, Brianna Morris. I am on LinkedIn. Please feel free to reach out.